All right, guys, this is slide 7. Things start to unravel. This is an extremely important slide, and looks like it's very short, but it won't be. This is extremely important. All right, so you got to follow along. You got to pay attention here. All right. We skipped over kind of 8 years there real quick of Grant's presidencies because they're not real significant. But what they do serve to do is get us to 1876, a very important time here in the country's history. Okay? We see a presidential election here. All right? The Republicans are going to nominate Rutherford B. Hayes. Okay? Rutherford B. Hayes. The Democrats are going to nominate Samuel Tilden. Okay? Now, let's refresh our memory here. Republicans are the ones that are trying to help blacks in the South, the freed slaves. Democrats are the ones trying to get their states back, to go back to the way things used to be. Right? So, just keep that in mind here. You don't want to get them mixed up. All right? Now, also, what you have to remember, electoral votes. Okay? Popular votes don't get you elected president. Electoral votes do. If you will remind me in class, we'll review quickly the electoral process and look at the big electoral map on the wall and kind of refresh your memories here. But as counting starts to wind to a close, okay, you need a majority of electoral votes, which in 1876 would have been 185. Okay? As counting started to wind to a close, Tilden had 184 electoral votes, with 3 states and 20 electoral votes still out. Okay? So if he gets any of those 3 states, he is the next president. Okay? Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida had all returned 2 sets of returns. They had all sent in 2 sets of returns. The Democratic electors in one, and let's just pick Louisiana. The Democratic electors in Louisiana said Tilden won Louisiana. The Republican electors in Louisiana said Hayes won Indiana. Okay, Louisiana. All 3 states returned 2 sets of returns. So nobody was quite sure who won each of those states. Now remember, Hayes has to win all 3. Tilden just needs to win 1 of the 3. Now the Constitution is very vague on this. Okay? The Constitution simply says that returns should be sent to Congress, and in the presence of the House and the Senate shall be opened by the President of the Senate. But it doesn't say who should count the returns. If they were counted by the President of the Senate in 1876, who was a Republican, he would have said the Republican returns are going to be counted. If counted by the Speaker of the House in 1876, who is a Democrat, he would have said the Democratic returns should be counted. So nobody's sure which set of votes to count for Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida. So nobody knows who the next president is going to be. Right? So let's fast forward here. We go through the rest of the last month or so of 1876. Nobody knows what's going on. We get to 1877. Okay? And the Electoral Count Act was set up. Okay? The Electoral Count Act established a commission of 15 men selected from the Senate, the House, and the Supreme Court. Okay. 15? Why 15? Well, it's an odd number. There couldn't be a tie then. But the problem with an odd number is that somebody's going to get outnumbered. Of those 15 men, 8 of them were Republicans, 7 of them were Democrats. And guess who they picked to win all 3 of those states? Yes, Republican Rutherford B. Hayes. Democrats scream bloody murder. Oh my God, we got screwed. We're going to sue, blah, blah, blah. And this gets even worse. Right? Well, we're now getting to the point where Inauguration Day is coming, and we don't know who the president is going to be. Right? The Democrats will not give up the fight. They will not stop their legal challenges. So a deal is worked out. It's known as the Compromise of 1877. And this is an extremely significant piece of legislation. There's probably no more significant deal, backroom deal between Republicans and Democrats that's ever been worked out in the history of the United States than the Compromise of 1877. I cannot tell you how important this is. I would try, but you'd get tired of listening and I'd get tired of talking. So let me just say, you got to understand this. You got to know how this works. Okay? Here's the deal. Okay? And you see here the little political cartoon. That's Hayes and his beard sitting on the little donkey there. The Louisiana leg kicking Tilden right in the chest there. Right? It says Electoral Commission right on the donkey's bridle there. So there's Hayes knocking Tilden down with the Electoral Commission. Here's the deal, okay? You got to understand this. So, the Democrats would allow Hayes to be president if the Republicans pulled all the troops out of the South. Think back to the Reconstruction Acts. Union generals in charge of states. Federal troops there. Well, even after new governments were elected, the new governments liked having the soldiers around. It made them feel safe. It kept the KKK in check. Okay? The Democrats will agree to Hayes being president if the Republicans pull the remaining troops out of the South. And particularly, if you look at the map here, in Louisiana, Florida, and South Carolina. Okay. Now, this is so important. Right? There's never been a worse political deal for the Republicans in the history of political deal making. They were so desperate to keep the White House because they figured if we can stay in the White House like we were with Grant, we can control these things. No, you can't. This is a horrible deal because while the Republicans get the White House, Tilden got screwed. Okay, the real losers in this are going to be the newly created black citizens of the South. Because once this deal is made and the federal troops are pulled out of the South, there is absolutely no one to protect blacks in the South. There's no one to ensure that they get their civil rights. There's no one to ensure that they get to vote. There's no one to ensure that they get treated as equal citizens. Once the soldiers are gone, there's nothing to stop the Southern governments from putting old pro-slavery whites back into power and screwing over blacks again. And that's exactly what they're going to do. The Compromise of 1877 essentially and effectively brings an end to Reconstruction. Reconstruction in the South is over when the federal troops are pulled out, because now local law enforcement is in charge, and there's a pretty good chance that your local sheriff is a member of the Klan. This is an extremely important deal that is made, and probably no worse a deal has ever been made if you're the Republican Party. So, that leaves us with one more slide, the end of Reconstruction, and we'll get to that next.